So, hello. Thank you, Danny, for introduction. So, as Danny said, this will be topic of my speech. It looks like a lot of words, but in fact, it's just about reusing logic between React components. What does it mean? For example, when you have this code, this is from your project like 2 weeks ago. It's a product list and product detail, and as you can see, there is a lot of similar code like setting initial state, fetching products from API, and setting or saving this data into state again. So, but as any boring speech, this will start with some history. So, at first, React used mixins in first versions. It was when React components were written in a custom create class function. But with ES6, it started to be deprecated because React started to use ES6 classes. Then they moved to the decorators. That's part of ES7 specification, or was part. But right now it's under redesigning, so again it's deprecated, so we don't use it. So right now we have high order components, or HOCs at short. Another way how to reuse code is render props, and final way is hooks that was introduced in React like 2 months ago. So this will be the main things we will be talking about today. So let's start with HOCs. This is definition from React docs. As you can see, it's a higher order component is a function that takes a component and returns a new component. It's really similar to higher order functions. And here's example of higher order component. This is a really simple component that will only show alert when your component will mount. So as you can see, it's just function that takes two parameters. One is wrapped component, second one is for example text, and it returns React class. Well, and in render, it just returns your wrapped component. Really important part is this props destructurizing, because otherwise this header component would swallow all props passed from upper components. So, and here is example how you can use it. You will just wrap your component in the function. It's all. So what it is? So it's just a pattern, not an API. So you can use it with every version of React. This idea comes from high order functions, as I mentioned. Usually high order components are prefixed with for example, with router or with subscription. And usually they are used as API for third-party libraries. For example, connect from React Redux is a high order function component. Also, for example, with formake or with router from React Router. And what it can do, it can, for example, add lifecycle to our components. So there is another example of HOC. Here, important part is just component that mount or will unmount. This HOC just takes size of the window and prints it in the console log. And be aware, here is a bug because we didn't return any props. So it would swallow all the props passed from upper components. Another thing that you can do with HOCs is manipulation of props. So again, when we have similar HOC, here we can add another prop, for example from state, or you can do some manipulation with props passed from upper components and return it. Another thing is render hijacking. So you can, in your higher order component, render anything you want besides that wrapped component. So you can add any div or add some conditional rendering and just render anything else than that component that's wrapped. And another important thing you can do with them is chaining. It can look like this when you have several HOCs and you want to use them on your component at once. This isn't the convenient way because it's really ugly, hard to read. So there is another way how to use it, and it's by composing functions. So you can use compose from Lambda, for example, but React Redux also has own implementation of compose. Then you pass your HOCs as function attributes. Yeah, when you want to pass there any another attribute, like here that hello text, you need to a little bit change your high order component. So you need to carry them, as Peter mentioned, and there are two ways how to do it. First one is really easy. You can do it manually. Just wrap your HOC in another function that will return your HOC, or you can use Lambda library, which just you will pass into carry function your HOC, and it will do this thing you did manually. It will do it. So what can you do with HOC else? Then there is a lot of other things. Here is link for the Medium post where it's really well described, and what HOC can do. It can be called in render method because it will cause that your HOC or the component wrapped in HOC would be mounted again and again on every render. So it will be really unperformant, and it will cause that you will lose state. Also, when you are using static methods in components, they are swallowed by design, so you need to use, for example, this library that will help you to fix this issue. And HOCs doesn't pass any refs, so you need to use React forward ref function. And you need to generate display name or write it by yourself. This is something that React does for your components by default, and it do that just that when you open your code in React DevTools, it has those nice names you are using for the variables. So, and there's one thing that I want to mention when we are talking about higher order components. It's called library called Recompose. What it does, you can see at bottom at the line 18. It just provides a lot of helper high order components, so you can do a lot of things that you normally would do in components itself, but here you can just reuse it. But again, it's not really readable. So this is what it will cause in React DevTools, that your component, in this case app, is wrapped in all these components. Well, some summary for it. Pros of HOCs. They are easy way to extend your components, especially when you want to keep them just in the functional way, when you don't want to use that classes. It's chainable, and it takes logic from components itself. And with libraries like Recompose, it's really powerful. Cons of it, well, this is the biggest concern when you are using higher order components, when you are passing props from one component to another and they have the same or the prop has the same name. It can easily happen that they will be rewritten by some of these components in chain, and it's really hard to find out when it happens. Another thing is that it gets really complicated with using static methods or refs, and yeah, it just mess in React DevTools. Yeah, that's what I said. Well, another approach is using render props. Again, this is this is from React docs. It's a component with a render prop that takes a function that returns a React element and calls it instead of implementing its own render logic. So what does it mean? That you have component like this that just takes any props you will pass there, and then in render you just return props. You specify, usually it's render, so it's called render props. And then you can call it in your app like this. Here is that text props, and here's render function in which all the rendering magic happens. So what it is? Well, again, it's pattern, not API, so you can use it with every version of React. It is designed in a way that it should fix all the problems of HOCs. It can work with any other prop than render, for example, children. And again, it's very often used by third-party libraries, for example, Formake. Route from React Router is render prop, and React Motion, it was the first library that started using render props. And what it can do? Well, this is a tweet that Michael Jackson posted. Michael Jackson is one of authors of React Router, not that singer, and he's biggest advocate of render props. So as he written there, it can do anything you can do in HOCs, and yeah, you can fight him. What it can do? Well, it doesn't work properly with React pure components. So there is workaround that it's again mentioned in React docs. And summary for render props. Pros is that it provides easy, like two-way interaction between component and render prop. You don't need to think about any collision of prop names, and it doesn't do any mess in React DevTools because everything just happens in one component. Cons are that all the logic is in the render method. Chaining of this makes code really confusing, and in the end it can look like callback hell. So that's the reason why people from React core team came up with hooks, and hooks is API. So you need a specific version of React, and it's version 16.8 that was released on February 6th, and it provides alternative way to components lifecycles, and usually it's prefixed by use, so use state or use effect. It doesn't introduce any breaking changes into React, so you still can use classes, and it's intended to be used by third-party libraries, but a lot of them are now rewriting to use hooks, so you can check what hooks are right now in this repo, which is curated list of hooks, and you can combine any hooks in custom hooks you will write by yourself. So well, React provides several built-in hooks, and it's quite big number of them. So I think that there is no time for going through everyone or every of them. So please check the React docs. It's really well described there. And here's some example. Use state is probably the most used React hook. It provides the same functionality as state in class component. Here you just import use state from React, and use state is a function that returns array with two fields. First one is the state itself and value that it has. Second one is function to modify that state, and this function takes one argument, and it's the initial state. Yeah, that's initial state. So as you can see here, this is component that provides really simple counter. You have button, on click you will just increment the number, and it's done in, well, like one line of code. Yeah. Another really widely used hook is use effect. This hook is intended to be used for handling side effects. It has a different API than use state. Again, you need to import it. Then you have just this function that doesn't return anything, and it has two arguments. First one is the function that will happen. Second one is array of variables that will this use effect watch, and on change of variable will be this use effect called. So when you provide this array empty, it will be called just on first render. If you will not provide any second argument, it will be called on every render. So be careful because it can cause a lot of mess. With hooks there are several rules how to use them. First one is that you can call hooks on top level. That means that you can't call hooks inside any loops, conditions, or nested functions. Second rule is that you can call hooks only in React functions. By React functions is meant like React functional components or custom hooks. And there is a SLint plugin called SLint plugin React hooks that will prevent you from doing these things. Well, and there's some summary for hooks. So pros is that hooks are really plug and play. You can just use it in your component. You don't need to wrap them or rewrite render logic for using them. Hooks provides you way how to use functional components everywhere, so you can get rid of ugly classes. Can be combined in custom hooks. Again, it takes logic from components. It's really well documented in React docs. And cons are that you need to follow these rules I mentioned. Syntax can feel quite strange because, for example, use state returns that array and not any variable or object or things like that. And you need to use a specific version of React or newer. Well, is it silver bullet for managing or sharing logic between components? I'm not sure now, but it's pretty close. So let's do some code. Yeah, and what will we do right now is that we will add pagination to your project, because you probably saw that you can only show 25 products even when in commerce layer is like 100 of them. So we will add pagination component, maybe slightly change her routes. We will do some encoding and decoding of query params. We will move all API calls into hooks and remove products from state. Yeah. So let's do it. Can you see it? Yeah. I need just to find it. It's maybe. Is it better? Okay. So at first we will install some new dependencies. We will install a QoS library for parsing query strings, Lambda, and ESLint plugin React hooks. Okay, so let's start with modifying ESLint. Here we just add a new property. It's called plugins, and this will allow us to add some new rules. There are 2 of them. Just these 2. First one that just guards you from not doing something against the rules of hooks. Second one is that you will always use all the parameters returned from hooks. And right now we will add that pagination component. I've already prepared that because it's quite straightforward. So we will just add it into our code. Yeah, so nothing interesting happens here. It's just component that creates range depending on props pages passed there. Range is function from Lambda. It just creates array with the number of fields you pass there. Then we will add some styles. Yeah, so save it. Yeah, it's there. So it should be everything needed here. So let's check if we can use it in products list. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm yeah. So we will put it probably here. It takes pages as prop. We'll try it right now with some number. And let's check if it's working. Yeah, here it is. And oh, my token expired. is here. As you can see, it changes URL. It just adds this query string page. So yeah, when I click on free, it changes to free. So what we will do next? I think that right now we can modify getProduct function, because we want to get property from commerce layer that's called meta. It contains information about how many products is in the returned array and how many pages is there with setup number of showed products. So at first we will try this meta, past it. Oh no, we need to change it a little bit more, but I think that I had prepared it. Yeah. So we have imported this QS library. Then
maybe it's the wrong file. You need to get products.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, correct. So let's do it again. Yeah, we are in products. So we imported this QS library. Then we change function to take one argument. We will call it URL params. Then in the API call, we are just destructuralizing this URL params, and we will return, or we will get this data and meta and include it from call. This is same as before, and we will return that meta attribute as well. So when we will save it, it will, yeah, I need to delete this at first. So right now when we go back to the list, we should try if there is any meta. Yeah, it's here. It says that there is 97 products on 4 pages. So we can pass it here. So when we will, yeah, it's not passed to the store, but we will do with that something, and that's it, that we will delete it and replace it. Once again. So it should be called products. we will again import that QS library. So what it does, so you can see we have changed it from class to the functional component. Then we will be using this location property passed from React router. And QS provides a function called parse. It will take string and return it as object based on what's passed there. So at this moment, when we have in URL that page equals page number, it will just return object that has page property that is the number. But location, as I can show you in React router documentation, returns object like this. For us, this search property is important. It returns everything that's behind URL, but it contains also this question mark, so we need to remove it. We are removing it by this substring function that says that we want everything from character at position 1. Well, and then we will get the data, but we will use hook for that. So we need to create hook. We will go to the API folder, create file called use API, and again I prepared it in advance. So what it is doing, we import useState and useEffect hooks. Then we create our function that takes 2 arguments. First one is some function that we want to use for getting data. In our case, it will be get products. And second one is called resolve condition, and it just takes array of variables that we want to have watched by useEffect. Then we set 2 states. First one for holding data, second one for loaders. Well, this is the most important part of our code. This is the function that will be consumed by useEffect. It just sets loading at true, then calls the function we pass there. This function returns a promise. So right now we have to use this old promise code, not any async await, because it throws error by React. I hope that it will be fixed soon. On resolving this promise, we just take data, we set them into the state. If any error occurs, we just console them, and finally we just set loading onto false. Then we use useEffect, where we pass that request, conditions, and in the end we return object with request. It's not needed right now, but more importantly with data and with is loading, so we can use these 2 in our components. So let's go back to the product list. We need to import use API. It's there. Okay, this is something what shouldn't be there. Well, so when we call use API, we pass there our function that returns function get products. We pass their object with page number. This page is taken from that URL param, and when we go to the get products, this is what will be what will be passed into this argument, and it will be stringified into API call. So I think that it should be, this can we remove right now. So right now there are no errors. Let's try it. So when we change page, our products are loaded. So one thing I forgot to mention is that into use API we passed this page variable, so it indicates that every one page changes, it should call again that use effect. Well, in this case there is one important thing to mention, that you can't easily pass any object or array there, because you need to at least do some shallow comparison. Well, and what's there next? Well, we changed that handle to add to card function or class property just into regular function, so it should be working when we try it. Check it in Redux. It didn't do anything. Let's check why. Okay. It's products. Oh, I forgot to add it into props. It's strange that Aslint didn't cry on me. Oh, it's at product. So let's try it again. Yeah, it's there, it's working. So right now it's yelling at me that I have it declared in upper scope. It means that I am importing function with same name, so it should be changed to make our code pretty and to be sure that any collision will not happen, but I think that's something that I don't need to show you here. So right now, what will happen when we go to the cart? It will cause error because we are not longer store any products in our Redux. So we need to change items in cart as well. So we will create new component in cart. Let's name it cart item. Again, it's something I prepared in advance. From that what is in the render function, it's almost identical to this. What are we to this? What are we show in this map function? So you can see. Only thing that we add is again this use API function. Right now we will be using it with get product by ID, and again things that will be that should be checked is product ID, and right now it's passed from the the cart itself. So we just need to change this. We need to import it. Oh, it's on the same level. What it takes as params, I think it should be just it's product ID, quantity, and remove product. So product ID, it's simple, it's just item.id, quantity, I think it should be similar, and then we need to pass there that remove product function. Oh, not like this, because we can use hooks only with functional components, so we need to change this. And we need to pass their items. You need to remove these props. And then we need to change this because we can't find any products in state. So how will we do it? I think that it should be just okay to pass their state card. Let's see what it will do, and there is some error. Oh, there shouldn't be this renderer. Yeah, that makes sense.
Maybe you need to remove this.
Yeah, all right. So it will be items, item dot quantity, ID. So yeah, we need to change it a little bit more. We just do ID is product ID, and yeah, it's working finally. Let's try to add something into cart. It's there, and we forgot on adding key, so let's add key here, and it can be item ID again. So add something into cart. It's working. Nice. Yeah, and I think that's it. So is there anything I want to say? Yeah, I have some reading for you. Definitely check React docs. There is a lot of interesting and useful documentation for the HOCs, render props, and especially about hooks. Then there are some interesting articles about HOCs and render props, and I think one video. There is something about hooks, and well, if you have some spare time, read these. These are about mixins and decorators. It's really interesting topic or interesting thing to read. And yeah, what should be your homework? Well, as Peter mentioned, you should try to use as much functional approach as is possible. Then try to create a functionality to set number of products you will show you will see on each page. Commerce layer has API for it, so check this pagination documentation. It's shown there how to do it. And then get rid of all classes in your code base and read as many articles as is possible from those lists I provided. So that's it. Do you have any questions?
So remove like even the top classes like app?
Yeah.
Class, all of them?
All of them. You can do it.
No, because I heard those like app class and so on, those should be still class and use the other ones like other components as a function.
Well,
it was like a while ago, so perhaps
yeah, it was in previous versions. Like now it should be, or it could be all of everything can be function.
Awesome. Thanks.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
I hope that you don't sleep.